Dear friends and colleagues and occasional visitor or two who have joined us on this sunny afternoon for a short event of PAGODE Festival. This is the second installment and there are a few more to come, these are events that try to showcase the work we have done within PAGODE Europeana China project. And we'll have several speakers with us today. Dunya, perhaps you can show us the slide. And first among them is our boss, Antonella Fresa, who is, I must say, a very good boss and who makes sure that everything runs smoothly. And Antonella will today tell us a little bit about the project itself before we move on to three very interesting collections, not as famous as those of, say, British Museum or Rijksmuseum, but precious nonetheless. And please, Antonella, first, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Very kind words from Maya. PAGODE is an exciting project, and maybe if you can start the presentation from the beginning. Yes, perfect. It is a very nice project and very new in its concept, because in PAGODE we have looked at collections that are less known, but still preserved and owned by European cultural institutions, museums, archives, and libraries. And through digitization, we are giving a new life to these collections. Next, please. It is about the Chinese heritage, and it is about understanding the relationship between East and West. And how are we implementing this scope? Please, next, please. First of all, we put together a consortium that is led by the Italian Ministry of Economic Development, because we thought that giving a new life to the Chinese collections in Europe can accompany this process of exchanges between Europe and China. We heard in these days about the meeting in Cornovaglia, where the point of the relationship between Europe and China was at the core of the discussion. So the relationship between Europe and China cannot be left without the possibility to know the culture of each other. And the Chinese know the European culture more than what we know about the Chinese culture. Next, please. So the consortium led by the Italian Ministry of Economic Development, but with the partners, SMEs and archives, private and public, each of us bringing new contents into the pot. Next, please. Not only the partners, but also other institutions that have cultural heritage from China and which expressed their strong willingness to join us, mostly on voluntary basis. Among them, the Slovenian Ethnographic Museum, but also KADOK from KU Leuven, the World Sculpture Museum in Leiden, the Benaki Museum in Athens, Museo Virasto in Finland, and the Leiden University Library in the Netherlands. So you see how variegated is the range of contents and institutions participating in PAGODE. Next, please. And what do we want to do? To bring more Chinese-related content into Europeana, to discover and curate these collections, to exhibit these collections in an exhibition. Originally, we thought to host a physical exhibition at the Museo della Grafica in Pisa, and unfortunately, we had to come back to the online experience. We are lucky because this online festival gives us the possibility anyway to show to our audience in this event and through a blog, a podcast that is available for download through the website, these gems, and to open new collections with China. Next, please. But we have to keep in mind that the final aim of Pagode is to use an instrument, an extremely valuable instrument that is called the Europeana. And to do this, we are bringing into Europeana and making accessible to Europeana 10,000 new digitized objects, annotating 2,000 of these new objects with enriched metadata via crowdsourcing experiences. And you, those interested in crowdsourcing, there will be a seminar of the Digital Festival on the 31st of August, exactly on crowdsourcing, and enriching through artificial intelligence mechanisms more than 20,000 digital objects that are in Europeana. Next. So these are the numbers: 10,000, 20,000, 2,000 annotated, new annotated contents. I stop here. I could spend the whole afternoon and tomorrow morning as well talking to you about Pagode, because we have much more interesting presentations from my colleagues. So thank you very much and enjoy our seminar.
Thank you, Antonella. Now, before I leave the word to our curators or managers of collections that we will be presenting today, I would like to very briefly discuss what one particular issue, what is Chinese heritage. So it's really just one slide. One of the first things that we had to decide in our project is what to include as Chinese heritage or China-related heritage. And of course, when we ask a question, what is China, Chinese-related heritage, cultural heritage in Europe, we obviously think of the things that came from there in China to here, to Europe. But we wanted to sort of avoid these very clear distinctions, this very strict boundary making. And we try to understand in this project, China and Europe as two very broadly defined regions, which have been for centuries in a process of exchange. And this exchange has taken many different forms. Obviously, we have all learned, I'm sure there's none of us who's present here who has not already in primary school heard of the Silk Road and the trade. So the first things that traveled between these two points of Eurasian landmass were objects, but objects with them brought a number of ideas, practices, knowledge, for example, knowledge of science and technology, knowledge of medicine as we see here, or of art, beauty, the ideas of what is aesthetically pleasing, what is fashionable, and so on. And of course, another component of this exchange is also the flow of people. People have moved between China and Europe again from centuries. Possibly the first Chinese came to Europe already in Roman period or parallel Han Dynasty in China. So we see that this exchange is has a very long and very rich history, that these exchanges are interwoven. So for example, people bring objects, but they also bring ideas. Objects themselves carry ideas, and objects become part of our daily lives. So what we're trying to do with this project is not just highlight what is Chinese, of Chinese origin, either in terms of material or of idea in Europe, but how China or things Chinese have also become part of our daily lives. So not to consider the heritage, the cultural heritage as belonging to either China or to Europe, but to highlight its common, its shared component. So with these few words, I will now invite the three speakers who will showcase their own collections, the collections and the objects they're contributing to the PAGODE project. And some of them are perhaps already discoverable in Europeana. Many more will be available from summer on. It's also very interesting, as you will see, that most of the collections presented today or the objects are actually two-dimensional. They're mostly photographs, and they were brought back or brought to Europe by various people. In some cases, we don't know who brought them. We don't know much about the way they came to Europe. In other cases, we know who brought them, but we know very little about why these people who brought the objects to Europe chose these particular objects and so on. And I will just leave it to my colleagues to sort of sketch this very rich and complex history of the exchange. So our first speaker, let me just stop sharing the screen. Our first speaker will be our colleague Eric, whom I forgot to ask how to pronounce his very complicatedly spelled surname. So I'll try, but please, sorry if it's going to sound like a massacre. Buelink.
Very
So
simple.
Eric Buelink from KIK IRPA, who will also tell us more first about the institution he's coming from and then about the Chinese collections they have there. Eric, please, and Dunia, you'll have to stop sharing so Eric can share his screen.
Is it there?
Yes, we can see it fine.
Okay. So my name is Erik Buelings. Sorry for the difficult name to pronounce. That's not my fault, it's from my ancestors. So I work at the Royal Institute for Cultural Heritage. This is the English name. The official name is in Dutch and in French. They talk about artistic heritage, but in an international and in what happened the last years and how we look about art and the other things around it, I think the English name reflects better what we do, in fact. So it's more about cultural heritage. So this is kind of a table of contents. The Institute has three main departments all around the study of works of art. So the laboratories, they analyze the pigments and things like that. We have restorers and conservators who do everything about making these artworks good again and making sure that they are stored or seen in decent places. And then there's a department of documentation where I work. And one element of the department of documentation is what we call the info shop kind of things, which brings together all the documentation that's created in the Institute. So there are lots of things that I won't talk about. It's like the restoration reports, it's like some specific imagery done by Macro XRF and other things. Is about analytics and things like that. But one very important part of our collection is that we also are responsible, or it's an official mission, or it was an official mission, is to make a photographic inventory of the works of art or cultural heritage in Belgium. This was before Belgium was politically changed in a very complicated thing, but in the previous years or decades, we managed to create a kind of an inventory of about 1 million photographs. The fact that we had to create this inventory, a photographic inventory, made us also decide that for all the photographs that we have, we needed to have the original negative. Otherwise, it wouldn't be like a real inventory of these things. Of course, as everybody knows, photography was mainly black and white the last 100 years. So that means that from our photographic inventory, there's about 90% still in black and white. Most of it is, of course, also still analog photograph with real negatives. although by the end of the 90s, we started to do digital photography. And what this inventory consists of, I'm going to read something. So it's 4 historically grown collections. First, Belgian collections from museums, churches, schools, administrations, ministries, archaeological campaigns. Then we have journalistic reports from photographers specialized in documentary photography that are considered to be of scientific value for the cultural history of Belgium. And we have street scenes, family picture, portraits, sports, war, folklore, landscapes, buildings, etc. Then, because it's about art in Belgium, it's also about Belgian art abroad. So we have also photographs of artworks that are considered to be Belgian because they are made by artists born in the now geographically region that we call now Belgium, but it's, of course, it's beyond existence when 1830. So in foreign museums, we have photographs. And then finally, we did also, as well in Belgium as abroad, photograph private collections. So these make up this 1 million, more or less, this 1 million negatives. What's different from the other partners in this project, and mainly in several projects in Europeana too, is we don't own any of these cultural heritage objects. What we have is photographs, and we consider these photographs as our objects. This is our heritage that we take care of and that we are responsible for. So that means also that when we are asked for to participate in a project like Pagode, we always have to look a little bit, but we mostly are sure that we can contribute, because say, okay, China, we probably have some 100 or 150 photographs of objects. Now, after the first small control, we arrived immediately at more than 2,000. I think for the moment we have 5,000 or something like that. Not all of it is already in our database. So we are not really sure how much that we have. So there's never a problem to find enough photographic material to participate in objects. So I tried now for this collection for this presentation to pick some items. Sadly enough, I'm not a specialist of Chinese cultural heritage, and we don't have any specialist of Chinese cultural heritage in our institution because this is not the focus of our work. But we have the photographs. And let's start. I divide them in some kind of objects. So we have here 3 plates. I guess that in our collection we have some plates and teapots and all this kind of thing, like thousands of them. The reason I show them here is that even if they are like black and white older photographs, of which we mainly do a very, very, very limited description, because it's mostly like the museums have to do this description, it's not really our task. The high resolution digitization of the negatives gives us some advantages to at least start doing a better description of these works of art. And from the last plate, I just show what digital magnification, zoom can do. So go back. So the last plate, there are some women with a parasol or an umbrella. So this is what we can do. And this can also help, maybe not us, but then other people who fall on the objects in our online database. There's a zoom function for all these objects. So you can really go into the deep and see what's exactly depicted on sometimes very small objects. We also have photographs of ceramics, and one thing that I should maybe explain also is you can see here, it's 2 folions. I have to look up what it was. But what's for me also explicatory or something like that is these objects belong to a museum in Kortrijk, is somewhere in Flanders. It was called Museum for Archaeology and Decorative Arts and Fine Arts. This museum doesn't exist anymore. So this museum, part of its collection became part of a new museum in that region because it's a very important place for the Flemish nationalist history. So they created a Flemish National Museum there. And all these other objects, they are stored in depots somewhere in this province. Luckily, we have all these photographs online and they will bring them online too. And here you have these 2 lions. They were like a kind of a protection of the house or of a temple in the Buddhist spheres, and the male often had a kind of a ball between the legs, as the one on the left, and the female has a little cub or little lion next to her. It's also a special, and another important thing is these are the negatives. So when the color negatives, and for the people who are a little bit, know a little bit about color photography, color negatives, they degrade very badly. So when we digitize these negatives, there's still some substantial work to do to make these colors come out again. Sometimes we're lucky and we still have the printed photographs which kept their colors longer. Sometimes we're not lucky, and then it's more like we don't have the objects, and it's a kind of a trial and error thing to make the object look decent. Then we have also sculpture from multiple periods. Here you have a Buddha head, Buddha sitting, and a god of war from one is from the early 7th to the 9th century. These dates that we put on these objects are the dates that we get at the moment that these photographs were made in the museum or the collection that objects hold. Which means also that for lots of objects, the description, the dates are probably wrong or not fine enough, because of course, what they knew in the 30s or the 40s or the 50s, this knowledge has changed. And so maybe people know more now and they have to be updated. So what we want to do also is, if it's possible, link with the original owners of the collection and try to find ways to interact with each other so that our metadata can be updated, and often that we can give photographs that they sometimes don't have of their own collection. As I said before, one of the things we do around Institute is restoration, conservation of works of art. This head of a bodhisattva was was asked for Kikirpa to make a kind of a treatment on it. And at this period, also the end of the 90s, it was all analog photography. So we have the before photography and the after photography, something popular on TikTok now too, I think. But you can see these difference too. And because these were photographs from the 90s, what they did then was instead, they also took detailed photography, something we don't do anymore, or not so often, because the digital digital cameras, they are so good that when you even take a general view of this object, you can still zoom good enough to have these details. But in that period, we have to take detailed photographs of it. So for one object like this one, we have about 50 photos. For the very major artworks, we have sometimes 1,000 photos of just one object. Now, these two paintings, and I have to once again take my because it's something important to mention, is that the most extensive collection of Chinese cultural heritage in Belgium is hosted by our sister institution, which is now called Art and History Museum. And they are just at a few hundred meters of where we are located. And in fact, we are a kind of an offspring from the early days, as we were a kind of a study of photography and chemical analysis, and we became independent. But there's still a very big connection between the two institutions. They have a separate China department. And this China department has a lot of what's called Chinese export porcelain. This Chinese export porcelain is normally exhibited in what we call the Chinese pavilion. One of our most famous kings, the horrible Leopold II, who has a kind of a colonialist, extremist view on the world, decided in the beginning of the 20th century that he wanted also some buildings near to his palace in Brussels, and there was created what's called the Chinese pavilion, a Japanese tower, and some other things. This Chinese pavilion, in a style with lots of little curly things, is part of the museum now, and it's in the middle of a renovation. So when it opens, it will have lots of all these wonderful Chinese porcelain and things like that. But the museum has other things, like for instance, these two paintings from the late 19th, early 20th century. And once again, these are these color negatives. Once again, I want to show what it helps for if we can do this magnification with digital photography of these negatives. So here you can see very good detail of this painting. This one is a digitization of what we call a diapositive, the little positives that were taken also, lots of work in photography in color. And also here, even though the main quality of such kind of digital positives is not very good, still with high resolution photography, you can get to a rather interesting view some little figures on this painting. This painting is stored in the Mas Museum, Museum aan de Stroom in Antwerp, which just to a little sidestepping again, we did all these photographs many years ago sometimes, and there's this nasty habit the last 10 years or 20 years that museums change their names, bring together parts of collections in a new museum. So this is also very problematic for our inventory to keep up to date with it. So sometimes you really have to know the old denomination of a museum to find objects of that museum in our collection. Again, to the Art and History Museum, they also hold a lot of interesting set of costumes. But I think I have to go a bit faster if I see. So I'll just show them. And once again, like here, the one in the middle, it's still from the 90s, where you have to, if you wanted to see a detail of the robe you have to dress, you have to just take a photographic detail. I have to talk with my colleagues of the museum because I know someone is listening, at least one person. When I checked this object in their database, in French, they talked about orchidée as a motif, and in Dutch, they talked about butterflies as a motif. So I just, for the moment, put, I don't know in our database what I will put, so I asked them that, but I think they are orchidée. Now, it's not only, of course, these dresses and these porcelain and these paintings and this sculpture. We have in Belgium also an international museum of carnival and masks. And so these are just 3 of the hundreds of examples they have of masks that were used in the, and help me if I pronounce it wrong, Nuo Opera or Theater. It's very, very fine and it's very expressive too. And then there's furniture. These are very, let's say, basic photographs. In the Museum of Art and History and in some other places, they have really very, very more interesting pieces of furniture, but just have a little cupboard and a little tea table, also from both of 2 different museums in Ghent. So, and now we come to the last part. There's also the archaeology. Once again, the first one, a chariot with an ox, comes from the Art and History Museum, and the head of a horse from also a very interesting museum in the Walloon region, Musée Royal de Marimont, which is not that big, but they also made a wonderful collection of very, very, very broad items. So you can find things that are of all kinds of different periods and regions and so on. So this is a very, very broad overview of what we do, because in fact it was very difficult for me to make a selection. So I have here like 10, 20, 30 objects of items of the thousands that we have. I end now with the black and white, but I must say that I cheated. So I looked for color photographs to make this presentation a bit more interesting. But I have to admit the main part of our collection is black and white photography. But the near size of it, the fact that we not only do one museum, but we do very interesting collections in multiple museums, private collections, and so on, makes it, of course, a very good starting point to find out what do we find in Belgium, and more broadly, because Belgium can be used as a little example of European countries, what kind of things can you find in these collections? So what else? So as I said, there's this problem for us that it's a very superficial sometimes inventory. So there's a incomplete and uncontrolled metadata. There's also, because we have to cater for such a broad domain, a lack of expertise, because some of the domains fall out what we call Belgium art from the 14th to the 19th century. Sometimes we only have the photographs and some scribbled cards, and the physical collections are not accessible or available anymore. And of course, the advantages is of that you can do searches in our institute to find things all over Belgium, and that we are always open to all kinds of collaboration opportunities. So I hope I didn't go too much over my 10 minutes. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you, Eric, for this very interesting presentation. I mean, it's really a wealth of objects that you are documenting, and very great variety of them as well. But as I was listening to you, it also I was stricken by the fact that, I mean, this is also a very good insight into the history of documentation itself, and And I think that also, even if it's misdated, you know, it's very valuable to see how knowledge progressed, for example, when it comes to Chinese objects or Chinese collections. So I think that for researchers, this is a real treasure trove of data. Thank you, Eric. Now, next is a representative of our second partner institution, which also deals with photography, and that's Carsten Pauli from United Archives in Germany. Carsten, please.
Hello all. First, I want to share my screen. Can you see the screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. Thanks for listening. I am Carsten Pauli, the Image Content Manager from United Archives. We are now very long member of Photoconsortium and take place in a lot of projects with Europeana until today. Who is United Archives? United Archives is a photo agency in the heart of Cologne since 2008. We are specialized on digitization of analog photo collections like photographer estates or gone press photo agencies. Our complete vision is to bring historical and cultural important content online for everybody, so that historical and cultural stuff don't get to forget. That's important for us. We're delivering for this project completely photography. So I will show you an overview of content from us. You can see always in the bottom some screenshots for an overview. And one of our collection is Light Picture Institute Carl Simon from Germany in Düsseldorf. We deliver for PAGODE 181 glass slides, which are completely hand-colored. Some are black and white, but the most of them are hand-colored glass slides from around the 1900s. We acquired the Carl Simon collection in 2012 at an auction. The core business of Carl Simon was the distribution of lecture series with self-made text and hand-colored glass slides, just for explaining. Some other collection from us is the teacher and travel photographer Hanna Seidel. Hanna Seidel was supported by German companies like the Lufthansa or the Commerzbank in the past. And from Hanna Seidel, we have 116 35mm small formats images. The topic is travel, street, and daily life photography around the 1960s. We acquired this collection by the owner, by Hanna Seidel in 2014, and digitized until today, I think like 50%. That means we have now online like 5,000 images, I think. But we have just 116 good images for the PAGODE project. One very nice collection from us is the ROBA archive. It's the ROBA publishing archive from Hamburg, Germany. The ROBA collection, or the complete archive, tells a lot about the German broadcasting and television history. We have completely, I think, in this collection 20,000 or more images, but just about 100 for the PAGODE project, 35mm small format and 6x6 negatives. The topic is television, travel, street, and daily life photography from the 1950s and the 1960s. Mostly by the known photographer Siegfried Pilz. It's in Germany, it's a known photographer. I don't think that you all will know him. Maybe if you know our collection then, but instead I don't think so. We acquired this collection also by the owner in 2013. And I think we have finished like we have finished 80% of this complete collection with now today 25,000 images. Furthermore content is the journalist and photographer Peter Frieden. We have from Peter Frieden 137 images with 35mm small format images. It's travel, street, and daily life photography, also around 1990s, a little bit earlier, so newer stuff. I think it's also interesting to see how the times changed from the 1900s until the 2000s and so on. Peter Frieden was head of the travel department from the ADAC Motor World. It's a very famous German vehicle club, if you know the ADAC Motor World, I don't know. Yeah, furthermore, we have the travel photographer Walter Rudolph. This is our biggest stack with mostly 6x6 positives images and 576 complete images for the PAGODE project. It's again travel, street, and daily life photography since the 1970s, acquired in 2014. Walter Rudolph worked for the Bavaria movie studios or film studios and the CEFA in collaboration with TUI tourism. He got this money from TUI tourism to travel around and take images from hotels, images from holiday places, etc. Now I want to show you some, not a lot, but some highlights from the different collections. On this slide, you can see on the right side a Chinese couple in the pillory, 1910s. The pillory was, I think, used for minor offenses in the past in China very often. So I thought this image is very interesting to show, and it shows a couple which were doing something wrong and have to stay on the streets. On the left side, you can see two lay helpers, young and old, in a monastery, China, 1910. I was thinking that image is very impressive because it's quite nice that you have one very old guy and one very young one who are helpers in a monastery. It looks pretty good, I think. Okay, let's go to some highlights from the ROBA archive. Here you can see 3 images, and I wanted to show the Chinese influence on German television, mostly around the 1960s and the 1970s. For example, on the left side, you can see Professor Heumer von Dittfurt. It's a very known German professor. In the television episode, Time Has Many Clocks, from the second German television series Cross Section on May the 5th in 1971. And the connection to China is because of the clock. The clock is a dragon clock. It's a dragon summer clock or something like that. And he shows in the show how many, how possibilities somebody have to make clocks or to have clocks, or what can be a clock, and so on. Summer clocks, sun clocks, etc. In the middle, you can see a film adaptation of a Chinese operetta, The Land of Smiles, in 1964. That shows that in Germany they have made film adaptations of Chinese operettas. It's quite interesting, I think. And a little bit funny on the right side is Mr. Chang Cooks Chinese. It was a very interesting and famous cooking series in Germany between 1966 and 1969. Here you see the actor and the cook, Mr. Chang, who feeds a very known actress, Marina Ried, or Ried in German. And Marina Ried is a a very known Russian and German actress. Okay, let's go to the next slide. On this slide, I wanted to show some highlights from Peter Frieben. And Peter Frieben was a good man to show how street scenes are looking like in China. And I thought the image on the left side is very interesting because you can see a Chinese policeman checking documents of a bicyclist at Beijing in 1984. And I think a little bit today it will be absolutely more crowded, I think so. And furthermore, I think you can't see in Europe streets with like 12 or 16 lines. So that's a very interesting image, I think. In the middle, you can see an absolute normal street life photo, I think, in China. There are Chinese people who love gambling and cheating each other on the street. And we have a lot of images like that in our different collections. I think so that seems for me that they really like gambling. And on the right side, you can see an elder couple dancing tango in the sunshine at Beijing. I was thinking that this image shows very nice that from my point of view, it is not normal that Chinese people are so open, if you know what I mean. They are normally more private and they don't show what they are doing on the streets. They are more into themselves and so on. And I think this picture shows that when they are at home or something like that, they can do some dancing in the sunshine. So that's the reason why I take this picture and I like it much. Now some highlights of Walter Rudolph, who is very good in taking daily life of China. And on the left side, I've taken a picture of bamboo-made scaffold of the front side of a building. I was thinking this image is very interesting because in Europe, you will never see a scaffold with bamboo. In the middle, there is a normal model who is presenting the latest fashion on a fashion show at Shanghai in the 1980s. And on the right side, you can see a swimming market on Emperor's Canal at Zuzhou, China, 1980s. Yeah, I thought it's very interesting because all the images are showing the daily life of China. Okay, that was my short presentation. And thanks for your attention. If you have questions, feel free. And I have fun for the next one.
Thank you, Carsten, for showing us this very interesting collection that you have. I mean, on the one hand, it shows it's a sort of a cross-cutting presentation of German photographic engagement with China. On the other hand, as an anthropologist who deals primarily with contemporary or China, you know, I find many of these photographs a really precious document of the way contemporary China, more modern, has changed. Even in such a brief period as 2 or 3 decades. Yes, as you were right to point out, you could never see such an empty street in Beijing anymore. Now it's not even bicycles anymore. It's just cars and maybe some electric mopeds. So this is really a precious document to see what life was like in the 80s, 90s. And I think it's a wonderful collection. I hope people will find their way to it, especially once it's in Europeana. I mean, although of course, even through your website, these photos are already available. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks.
Yeah. Now, finally, a colleague of mine from Slovenia, Ralf Čiplak-Mencin from Slovene Ethnographic Museum, which is an associated partner in PAGODE project, contributing Chinese objects from the Skuša collection. And Ralph, if you're ready, Dunia, you have to stop sharing, and then Ralph, please go ahead.
Yes, I'm ready. Hello, my name is Ralph. I'm sorry, I'm in the darkness because the light is just behind me, and we have a very nice sunny day today. So I will explain you a little bit about the Ivan Skušek Jr. collection. And you know that there are already some objects from this collection on Pagode Europeana. You can see?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, yes. Well, our story starts in 1913 when a 36-year-old Slovenian, Ivan Skušek Jr., embarked on Austro-Hungarian protected cruiser Kaiserin Elizabeth in Pula. He was a Navy officer, commissary, taking care about the food supplies. They sailed to Japan, but in summer 1914, July 28, the World War first started, and they turned the war vessel toward Qingdao, which was a German concession in China at that time, which was attacked by Japan and United Kingdom. They were defeated in the siege of Qingdao, which lasted from October 31st till November 7th, so actually just 1 week. And it was the first aircraft battle in the history. The ordinary sailors were transferred to Japan, and Ivan Skušek Jr. was transferred with the other Austro-Hungarian Navy officers to Beijing legation quarter and held in captivity until the end of the World War I. In the Beijing legation quarter, the German part was transformed into a prison. He continued to be a commissary and had a free exit to Beijing. Most probably with the advantage of free exit, he started to profiteer. Obviously, he knew how to earn money and converted it for a very small amount to Chinese antiquities, which were sold on the black market and in numerous antiquity shops. By 1920, he made an extensive collection of Chinese furniture, Chinaware, vases, Chinese antiques, Japanese textiles, embroideries, numismatics, footwear, Buddhist sculptures, roof tiles, gong, kimonos, ceramics, and so on. How he bought and how he stored all the items is still a big mystery. Ivan Skušek Jr. met a lovely young Japanese lady in a Beijing florist shop, hearing her speaking German with her children, and fell in love with her. They married on June 12, 1920, so exactly 101 years ago. Her name was Tsuneko Kondo Kawase and was born March 1st, 1893, in a fisherman's village Atobe in prefecture Gifu, not far from Nagoya in Japan. There are different versions of her childhood. One is that her father was a fisherman and a carpenter, and because of the catastrophic earthquake, he lost all his property and was forced to sell Tsuneko to a geisha house. But there are still other stories. The other is that she lost her father at the age of 2, and her mother, Tono, her maiden's name Mari, started to work as a housemaid because she lost her husband at the Japanese gardener architect Kagijiro Kawase, who was childless. She came into the house with her only daughter, Tsuneko, whom later Kagijiro adopted. Kagijiro moved with Tsuneko to Manchuria and later to Beijing, where they lived among the Chinese and Japanese aristocracy, where Tsuneko learned a lot of skills like dance, origami, ikebana, Japanese tea ceremony, and so on. She also spoke several languages: Japanese, German, Chinese, English, and Slovene. She was a very intelligent and skilled woman. In 1911, she married the German customs high official, Pavel Heinrich Schmidt, at the age of 18. And here you can see both pictures of her adopted father and her husband. This story of the Japanese gardener, architect Kagijiro Kondo Kawase, is important because after Ivan Skušek Jr.'s death in 1947, Tsuneko, alias Maria Skušek, started to tell a story that she is the daughter of a Japanese count and that she inherited the whole Chinese collection. The story was bought by our museum and explained to the visitors, so they had even a more respectable attitude to the Chinese collection. Much later, when I did a thorough research, I discovered the truth about the Skušek's Chinese collection. Next year, in 2022, our museum is going to visit a group of Chinese experts from the Forbidden City in Beijing. And for the first time, after 100 years, in small pieces, we are going to restore the Chinese decorative walls and the model of a Chinese house. Tsuneko had 2 children with Pavel Heinrich Schmidt, a son Matthias and a daughter Erika. As the World War first started, Pavel Heinrich Schmidt was mobilized and forever disappeared. But luckily he left to Tsuneko a flower shop. In September 1920, Ivan Skušek Jr. arrived with his Japanese wife Tsuneko, her 2 children, and 8 Pekingese dogs in the Ljubljana railway station in the newly established kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes. They were a great attraction for Ljubljana. Shortly after followed 2 railway wagons full of Chinese and Japanese antiquities. Ivan Skušek Jr. wanted to establish his own East Asian museum in Ljubljana, and he bought a piece of land, but didn't have the money to build a museum. The World War II stopped all his dreams and wishes, and he died in 1947. Before he passed away, he donated all of his collections to the National Museum of Slovenia, and Tsuneko received a lifelong pension. Here you can see pictures of Ivan Skušek Jr. and Tsuneko in China. Tsuneko renamed Maria Skušek after her convert from Shintoism to Christianity on April 18, 1927, the same day she received all Christian sacraments. After the new Skušek family settled down in Ljubljana, Tsuneko was very unfortunate. Both of her children died. Her son Matthias in 1933 and her daughter Erika in 1958. Tsuneko remained alone in her flat, surrounded with her wonderful Chinese and Japanese collection. She became very active in the social life of Slovenia, and we could call her the first ambassador of Japanese culture in Slovenia. She had many lectures about Japan and China, and even radio broadcasts. Tsuneko passed away in 1963, and the National Museum donated the wonderful Chinese and Japanese collection to the Slovene Ethnographic Museum, which displayed the collection in a newly acquired Goričane Baroque manor, just 25 kilometers from Ljubljana. Here you can see some of the items Ivan Skušek bought. He bought a photo album of old Beijing. Here are the pictures, different scenes from Beijing. Maybe you know today it's the Astronomic Museum, the former Astronomic Observatory on the right. He bought also a rare album of decoration of the Forbidden City made by the College of Engineering, Imperial University of Tokyo. His album has the number 157 out of 1,000, but today only a few are left. So here it's some pieces, some plates of that album. It's a wonderful album, and they could reconstruct, because even the Forbidden City was destroyed in many ways. These are also some of the old photos from the beginning of the 20th century from that album. Ivan Skušek Jr., he made also an extensive Chinese numismatics collection with more than 1,500 Chinese coins from different Chinese dynasties. I think we put some of them already on Europeana Pagode. He bought also Chinese deity sculptures and Chinaware, Chinese fans and lady shoes for the lotus feet. You can see beautiful embroidered fan. He collected also Chinese mirrors and furniture, Chinese drawers and folding screens, chairs, tables, and Chinese lanterns, clothes, Buddhist sculptures, cloisonné, Chinese roof tile, decorative mythological creatures from some temples. For nearly 50 years, we thought that we have a Chinese tea pavilion in our collection, but the Chinese experts from the Palace Museum in Beijing who visited our museum discovered that we have 8 decorative walls and a very rare model of a Chinese house. The Skushek Chinese-Japanese collection in the Gurichane Castle was in Gurichane Castle as a permanent display until 1991, when Slovenia became an independent state and the castle was returned to the Roman Catholic Church in 2001 due to a new law of denationalization of the private property. All the museum collections were moved to the storerooms of the new Slovene Ethnographic Museum on Metelkova Street in Ljubljana, where a museum quarter was established. There are 3 museums now in this museum quarter. Today, just a small part of the collection is on a permanent display. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Ralph. First for showing how sometimes the story of collectors and how collections came to be are as interesting and fascinating as the objects themselves. And also, I'm very happy to say that part of what you've shown, namely the photo album and the 2 printed albums from Tokyo University, which detail the Forbidden City and other imperial palaces, as well as the Skushek's also quite interesting numismatic collection will be digitized and then ingested into Europeana through the Pagode project, and thus not so hidden anymore from the public. Before we conclude, I hope we already tickled your interest in the Pagode project and the objects that will become available through our efforts. But to give you a little bit of an insight, what else we have done, not just digitize the objects, I'm inviting our colleague Sophie Thais to show us how and where we can discover more of Pagode Europeana China content.
Thank you, Maya. Is it possible for me to share my screen? Yes, it is. Let's hope all goes well. Can you guys see my
Yes,
slides?
yes,
You can. Great. I want to thank all the speakers so far, because actually what I wanted to talk about, namely engaging with Pagode, is exactly what you are already doing in magnificent ways, even if only with magnificent stories like the one that Ralph just shared. I mean, this is totally making my day. What an incredible piece of storytelling. So many thanks to everyone, and in particular to this amazing research carried out by Ralph. Talking about different ways in which people contribute or can contribute, if they're not doing that yet, to Pagode, I first wanted to invite people who know of interesting collections to flag them to us, or to reach out, of course, if you have a collection of your own that could fit in well with what you've seen so far during these presentations, because we already have an incredibly active and fun consortium of partners to work with, but we are open for more. So anyone interested in contributing Chinese or China-related content to Europeana, we will be happy to support as Photoconsortium in terms of aggregation, in terms of metadata creation, and all the wheels that need to be put in motion in the slipstream from institutional collections to big gateways, big digital gateways such as Europeana. Another way to help out the PAGODE effort is to help us improve the metadata to Chinese collections or China-related collections. This is something that we perform on the new items that are coming to Europeana in the scope of PAGODE, but also on what we call legacy records, so content that has been in Europeana for a while, that has in some cases been created quite a few years ago, back when data and metadata standards were not yet what they are today. And a few strategies are being used to improve or enrich metadata on such legacy records, among which I could name the automated improvements that are being carried out by artificial intelligence algorithms that we let loose on existing collections. But what we also do is involve the crowd. So we ask the crowd to help us manually to add metadata tags to Europeana records. And in this case, we are involving also not only the old Europeana records, but also the new partner collections that are being contributed to via the project. What we used to do that is a very, really a fun tool, a fun platform, the Crowd Heritage platform, of which you see a few screenshots here. So for those of you who don't know it, please visit crowdheritage.eu. You can enter one of our Chinese campaigns that is still open and not completed yet. I took here a screenshot of one that is complete, and where people could pick from 5 manually curated sub-collections of China-related heritage, of which you can open a batch of images that appeals to you, then pick an image that you would like to add some metadata text to. And this is something that we installed using multilingual, or not multilingual, but interlinked thesauri, so authority vocabularies, controlled vocabularies that allow for picking terms from lists of keywords that are individually linked to, for instance, Wikidata. And of course, Wikidata allows the metadata then to become published as multilingual metadata in Europeana. What you can also do, apart from, as you can see here, pick a keyword from the list, is you can upvote and you can downvote text that other people added, thereby adding importance to certain of the tags that are already present. And all of these data in the end gets validated by people such as myself, the curators, the editors, the content providers, the people involved in PAGODE, and is then fed back to Europeana so that they can help other users find, retrieve, and reuse, in the end, more of these beautiful China-related gems. As I said, we have one campaign still open at the moment. It's dedicated to Chinese artifacts. We find that this content requires somewhat of a specialized knowledge. It's not always easy to recognize Chinese amulets and devotional sculptures and even everyday objects that have been used many centuries ago. So this is a campaign that certainly is benefiting from the Ljubljana team's contributions and the students that have helped so far to add thousands and thousands of tags. So many thanks to them as well. This campaign is still open for a few weeks before we close it down and feed it back to Europeana. Still some time to surf to crowdheritage.eu/China and to add some tags, upvote or downvote. What you can then also do as a an element of engagement is, of course, explore our China hub, which we established on Europeana. Before Pagode, there was nothing there dedicated specifically to Chinese or China-related heritage. Now it is there and it is blossoming. Actually, today we counted the offerings that we have available there, and we are at 31 editorials. We're extremely proud of having done that within the scope of a year. And we still have some months and some more editorials and more collections to come. Currently, we have some blogs that you can browse, from Empress Dowager Chi to fun topics like the Mandarin duck. We have galleries to explore, fruits from China, rice cultivation, tea harvesting, fashion, jewelry, everything you can imagine and more is there. And then in the browse entry points, what we do is provide direct access to some of the subsets of beautiful records that our partners are contributing. So as to allow users to step into batches of images that they possibly would not discover on their own in between the 55 million other records that are available on Europeana. So this is an immensely grateful and relevant way to make the gems, the lesser known gems of Chinese heritage, more visible through Pagode. And as you can see, I coincidentally chose here a browse entry point that leads straight into the Carl Simon collection of United Archives. Voila, there is this digital festival that's up and running. We're all part of it at the moment right now, but it's not stopping yet. We will be continuing all the way through summer until the end of September, when the project comes to its conclusion. And all of these events are, of course, accessible for free. You don't even have to register, and you find the program via our Photoconsortium Pagode page. Finally, there's an exhibition to be published on Europeana by the end of September. We will be visiting that exhibition virtually during our closing conference, also at the end of September, at which occasion we will also be presenting the Pagode book, because the exhibition is coming with a book, which is a showcase for all the partners who worked with us on this project. It will contain some interesting essays contributed, among others, by some of the people, the outstanding academics present in this company. And finally, it will contain a narrative that is both complementary and contextualizing to the exhibition. That was it. You can visit and learn more about the project through these online showcases. If ever you want to share your enthusiasm about Pagode, please use the hashtag Europeana China. And that leaves me only to thank you for your attention and thank Maya for her invitation for me to help conclude this event.
Yes, thank you very much to all the speakers, my colleagues. I hope we've convinced the others, the visitors too, that we've been doing a lot of work, and I would say a lot of great work, if I may be allowed a little bit of self-praise, you know. And there's still work for us, of course, to come for a couple of months more. But I hope that you already found some of what we've shown you interesting, and that you will continue following our efforts as the project moves to its final stages. And hopefully maybe one day has a sequel to it as well. Now, even though we've already gone for almost an hour and a quarter, I would still like to open the floor for a couple of questions, if you have any, or comments. Please feel free to ask. You can either post them in the chat section, or you simply raise your hand and ask it out loud here for everyone to hear.
I had a question for Karsten, if he's still here.
Yes, I'm still here.
Hi, Karsten. I was wondering when it was interesting for me to see where these different China-related sub-collections come from, and in some cases you receive them from the photographers themselves. In other cases, you purchase them or acquire them in auctions or at fairs, probably. I was wondering in how far do these archives or do these images come with any metadata at all? I mean, are some of these sub-collections readily, completely metadated when you get them, or is just grassroots work that you have to perform?
It's completely different. Some collections are from really good photographers who have a very good metadata information on the collection himself or on orders, on folders and so on, with maybe on the small format where stands the place and what they are doing and when it was and so on. But other ones are just telling, are just giving us a box with negatives or positives where stands just China or something else. And then we have to research a lot, sometimes more, sometimes less. It's not really easy because we are a commercial company and we have to get money from the images normally. Not always, but the normal way is that in our company. And yeah, we have to find a way between how much research we can do when we have less information, or we live with it that we can say it's a street scene in China or something. Yes, it's completely different. Sometimes it's very, we have a lot of informations and sometimes we have really less information. Yeah.
I got to wonder about that because I was a little bit struck by the description of the people gambling and cheating in the streets, even though it kind of sounds funny, but it seemed to me a bit of a strange metadata with that picture. So I was wondering where that was coming from.
That was, I think that was coming from a colleague from me. He was just see the image. He was knowing that it was in the 1960s or something like that, or 1980s, I'm not sure. And he saw the street scene and describing it a little bit. And yeah, and he described this with gambling and cheating. So that's why the metadata or the description is like that. Yeah.
Yes, this is a little bit of a difficult job, especially if you have somebody, as we've discovered now, most of the participating institutions don't have their own experts in with Chinese studies or sinological background. So yes, of course, this cheating all immediately has, or even gambling, but especially cheating might have a negative connotation. Yeah, so that's it, but it is a very common way of spending free time, so playing cards or playing these different games. I mean, I think one of the really nice things, looking at your pictures, was sort of reliving the street life in China, which of course now with the great urbanization is changing a lot as well. But the couple that you showed, the dancing, that is also something very typical to see in a Chinese park. That's how people come together and spend time. And so for us who haven't been able to go to China for like a year and a half now, I think it's also very nostalgic, I believe, to see pictures of just daily life, even though they were from the 1980s. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, Sophie, yes, that your question pointed out to some of the issues that have been the greatest challenge for content providers, and also for us as the in-house experts on everything Chinese. Even as a sinologist, obviously, you're not qualified to provide good quality metadata for all these things, and it's been a lot of work and a learning process for us as well.
And we are definitely not China experts or something like that, and we have to deal with our money, and so it's not so easy if we are a university or something like that, or we get a lot of money from European projects or something, then you might have a little bit more, can give a little bit more input or a little bit more research than we can do. And that's maybe a reason why our descriptions are not always completely right, I think, maybe, but we try to describe the scene, and we try to give as many correct informations we know or we can research. So that's
and maybe in the 30 years time or 50 years time, another group of people will be showing our own metadata, like Eric was showing the one from Kikirpa and saying, you see, that's how far we've come now in our knowledge of China. Yeah, Eric, please, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I would just want to add, because I see from Karsten, which is even though commercial firm struggles with the same things that we as a public institution do, is that more and more you come to the fact that the collections are very big and the people that you have are very few. And it's a day-to-day struggle. It's going so far that also in our institutions, the focus seems to be getting on, if it brings some money in, it will be more important than the other things, which is completely the opposite of the public mission that we have. But I can understand it, because otherwise it's like you can't do anything anymore. And the museum, my sister museum or neighbor museum, I can explain it differently. For one reason or another, Belgium was a world power in the 19th century and beginning of the 20th century. And now it's one of the most small countries in Europe. Okay, there are some little ones. But due to this fact that we are this world power, imperialistic on mind and colonialist in mind, we managed to have collections like the one in the Museum of Art and History, or in the Africa Museum, or Natural Science, or even our library, that are so big that they are proportionally 10 times bigger than the ones in Paris or in Berlin or things like that. So we are not able anymore, and this is very frustrating. So we're not able anymore to care enough in a good way for all the things that we are responsible for. And all the little things like Pagode or like other things, we are so grateful that we can do it, but still it's like, it's not enough. It will never be enough, but it's a day-to-day struggle we all face.
Yeah, and I think in that sense, the engagement of public is very valuable part of this project. Trying to bring together all our strengths, inviting people who have the knowledge, the passion to help us in improving ever so slightly the metadata, the information, the accuracy of the information, and of course making these objects also more discoverable.
Yeah, we need the experts, and we need the experts, and we need the big public, and we need artificial intelligence, and we need all these things. And in the near future, maybe we can bring these things even more productively together. And this project and other ones I did with Antonella and some of the colleagues here are working in this direction. So I'm optimistic, and I'm also a bit pessimistic, because it is so much. It's such a big mountain. On the other hand, we're not standing still. We're doing something about it. And you are doing something about it.
Yeah, and first, I think the most important thing is that the analog material is getting digitized. And all other things like improving of metadata and so on can be in the past, in the future, maybe in 10 years, maybe in 5 years. It depends on AI, or it depends on maybe Europeana with the enrichment program. And hopefully after this project, our metadata are improved. That would be nice.
I think involving the heritage community. So in this case, Chinese or Chinese communities from either Europe or outside of Europe, is a really fruitful, I think, efficient way, but also a very inclusive, participative, and therefore quite an ethical way to work on metadata. I think if we can streamline even further how to work with the crowd, this could be extremely beneficial to deal with these kinds of heritage collections in a way that's also ethically decent.
Antonella, you wanted to say something?
I think that all the occasions are good to advocate the fact that digitization is just the first step of a long trail, because when the digitization has been done, and it is already problematic, we have heard from Eric how many problems also in transforming the object into a digital object, because the object belongs to a different organization, because the picture is taken in a color and the color is degraded, and so on and so forth. And the formats and the transformation of the formats, the updating, the preservation of the repositories. But that is just one step. Because then after this step, there is another enormous step that is the creation of the metadata. And the creation of the metadata is the work that is done at the time of the digitization, because if it is done seriously, then the rest is feasible. If it is done in a bad way, then the next steps are very difficult. But then there is annotation, automatic annotation, linking with the international vocabularies, creation of a semantic background, involvement of crowdsourcing. All of this is a lot of work. And it is strange how the European Commission thinks that Europeana can have a longer life, giving just the money to the foundation for the sustain of the central registry. The registry, without the work that is done by content providers, becomes old very soon, and this is something that we should advocate. I think that all the occasions are good to insist on this aspect, and this will be the content of my contribution to the book. I think that it was clear in Pagode. We spent just a few efforts, few resources for the registry, for the mapping, but that is something that, yes, it is complex. Luckily, we have the colleagues in Athens that help us, but that is just a mechanism. It is like plugging into the electricity system, but then the production of electricity and all the devices that are able to use this electricity, and they are the real investment. And instead, the public money on this is still very limited at the European, at the national, at the regional level, at the local level. And so, and this, the beauty of our work, I think, is that we are not claiming money for the museums only. We are claiming money for the whole sector that is made of museums, archives, those who digitize, the private sector that engage in this, the universities. So, yeah. But we have to advocate that the digital transformation in the cultural sector is not to give money for a registry only. That is only a small part.
Yes, and I think this is the time to be really loud about it, because at least in Slovenia, from what I can tell, of course, the pandemic sort of put more pressure on different institutions to go digital, to digitize, also on museums, to digitize the collections and so on. But they are not really, I don't think they're providing any special funds for this work, although, as you know, I've experienced firsthand as well. It's a really enormous project. Yes, Eric.
Yes, I can just add another aspect to this, because we are also on a European level and a Belgian level. As a public institution, you have the public sector information and the road to open data and all these things. So as a public institution, the idea is that you can put everything out in the open for everybody. And I'm very, very for it. So as a general idea, I'm very for it. But what these ideas forget, what they forget on that level is, you can't do it without a very, very big amount of spending and organizing and things like that. So the last month, there was also a discussion in Belgium, and with institutions like ours, and the idea that we put forward is just say, okay, if you want open data, we will do it. Here's the annual cost to do that. Apart from the regular work that we do, because we need service, we need IT people, we need maintenance, we need backups, we need things like that to do that. And then they look, oh, that's expensive. Yeah, but that's the situation.
And we are for getting the major problem of preservation, because, okay, we digitized, we created the metadata, we prepared the registry, everything is working, and then a new Bill Gates arrives, it creates another operative system, a new kind of machine arrives, Steve Jobs, the new Steve Jobs creates a new device, and we trash away everything and we start again. So the preservation, it seems that our program managers look at the final, at the top of the iceberg, the final step, but there is a lot of backstage work that is more than putting books into the scanner. And who is spending, who is investing there?
Yes, on this activist note, I I urge you to all, you know, do whatever you can in your little ways and put pressure more on the relevant institutions through all these different channels, and hopefully we will achieve something. But as for today, I think we've done our part, and we deserve a little bit of a free afternoon. Enjoy a bit of sunshine, at least in Slovenia, and relax in order to be able to struggle again, to battle again from tomorrow on. I thank you all for your contributions, the speakers especially, of course, the discussants, and also all the silent listeners who hopefully took some of our words to heart, and we'll look at our work, we'll check out Europeana China website, all the related materials, and of course we'll, through your own channels, also perhaps raise awareness about all the challenges of digitization, open access, and so on. All this work that still has to be done, but we're scrapping, you know, with one little spoon. Maybe one day we will, what do you say, that destroy the mountain that's in front of us. But of course, Antonella already, in her optimistic way, already put another mountain in front of us, right? The Bill Gates or another technology and so on. Anyway, thank you all for your participation. You're warmly invited to join other PAGODE events, which you can find on Photoconsortium, PAGODE website. And I wish you a pleasant end of this very productive day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Thank you.